Hey, this is Matt once again. What about the other videos? A paid request, this time from Arthur. Thank you so much for that. And for those interested in requesting any type of videos, topics, reactions, commentaries, what have you, feel free to send it either directly to my PayPal or join my Patreon. Both links are down below in the info box. And this time it's for the original 12 Angry Men from 1957, which of course I've heard of for many years. And actually, I've seen more the remake, which was around 1997, give or take. And I enjoyed this film because I enjoy the concept. It's so simple, but yet so effective. I think it's a very well written movie in terms of really keeping your attention, even though it's 12 people on a jury in one room and they're discussing this case where 11 men think guilty and one, here played by Henry Fonda, think not guilty because he thinks, well, maybe we should talk about this. Is a kid's life at stake, a kid who has been accused of stabbing his abusive father to death, and everyone else thinks it's an open and shut case, but Henry Fonda is going, well, maybe we should at least talk about it for a little bit. And as the movie goes along, as they showcase, well, wait a minute, this may be not as open as shut as people think. There's a lot of cases for reasonable doubt. Although, if I understand, if you talk to lawyers, if you talk to people in the law, they would say that this film is wrong because they should not have had a not guilty verdict. There are people that, again, who are lawyers that say because of all the circumstantial evidence, they should have convicted the guy, or it would have been at least a mistrial. And so they say this movie, as well as the remake, is a sense of false bullshit. But at the same time, I enjoy the way it's done in the movies. I think it's a more ideal way for drama. In a way, it's kind of what you want juries to think, how you want them to think, at least for the most part. And I would say, before I get into this, I would prefer the remake. I do like the remake more than this, mainly because the remake used a lot less music. Which, I mean, there's not a lot of music in this as well, but like at the very end of this remake, there's this big blaring, I forget if it was horns or like music, like a lot of these films in the 50s and 60s when it's the finale of the movie, and they felt as if they needed this big blaring score to showcase that this is the finality of this movie. I thought that music seemed out of place for this kind of story. I thought how more subtle and quiet was and the remake was better. Also because while this cast does a good job, the cast in the remake I enjoy much more just because their actors are much more recognizable. Because you look at the remake, it's directed by William Friedkin, who did The Exorcist, who did The French Connection, who did The Hunted, which is a personal favorite of mine with Benicio del Toro and Tommy Lee Jones. And you got Jack Lemmon from Grumpy Old Men and The Odd Couple and various other movies. You got Hume Cronin, who I remember from Cocoon and Batteries Not Included. You got Edward James Olmos from Blade Runner. You got William Peterson from Manhunter, and among many others. CSI. I remember from Manhunter. You got Tony Danza even. Yes, Tony Danza in the cast. You got George C. Scott. You got Michael T. Williamson from Forrest Gump. You got Cordy B. Vance from various movies. Good actor. Liked him in Hamburger Hill, among others. Dorian Harewood, another good actor. Armin Mueller-Stahl, which he was on The X-Files, and he was in David Fincher's The Game, and other movies. I mean, you got a hell of a cast in that movie. But this is a good cast as well, because even this, there's people are recognized from back in the day. Of course, Henry Fonda, great established actor at the time. You have Martin Balsam, who I remember from movies. He was in the Delta Force with Chuck Norris, among other stuff. You got E.G. Marshall, who I remember from Creep Show. He was in the Creeping Up on You with all the roaches. He was in that story in Creep Show. Jack Klugman, who's on the TV show The Odd Couple as Oscar. Jack Warden, who was Big Ben in Problem Child 1 and 2, and he was in other stuff as well. He had a bit role in the Robin Williams film's Toys as the general that was bedridden, who's the father of the bad guy in the film. Lee J. Cobb, who I think played the detective in The Exorcist, which, funny enough, then George C. Scott would play that character in The Exorcist 3. So that's 2 times George C. Scott played a Lee J. Cobb character. Lieutenant Kitterman in Exorcist 3, and then this character in the remake. Like I said, Martin Balsam, I think, is the character that Courtney B. Vance plays in the remake. Henry Fonda, Jack Lemmon played him in the remake. E.G. Marshall, much more of a stout, serious guy. Armin Mueller-Stahl played him in the remake. Jack Klugman, I think Dorian Harewood played him in the remake. Jack Warden, Tony Danza played him in the remake. There's also another guy I recognize, John Fiedler? Filer? I can't pronounce his last name. But I recognized him, and it's because, number one, I saw him in a lot of TV shows at this time. Seemed like a very, glasses, very meek guy, shy guy, won't stand up for himself. If you're a fan of Kolchak the Night Stalker, which I am, the TV show, he played Gordy the Ghoul, who was the mortician. He was in a couple episodes that would help Kolchak and get him information. He was also the voice of Piglet for many, many years on Winnie the Pooh, until Sally passed away in sometime in the 2000s, but he was the voice of Piglet. So definitely a lot of recognizable people here as well. And like I said, this is a story that you could tell today and it would still work. Because just to me, and you have another director who's worthwhile, Sidney Lumet, who did Serpico and Dog Day Afternoon, among other movies. Network, among others. Because you have all these characters trapped in this room and tensions are rising, and it's just the way the conversations go and makes you think the way they're thinking. So, for example, okay, one eyewitness. Spoilers for those who've never seen 12 Angry Men. I do like both versions. It was nice to see both now. Because, again, this is the first time I saw the original. Nice, luscious, black and white. Again, I would say I prefer the remake. I still need to pick that up. I think if did finally get a Blu-ray, I forget if it was Tino Lorber or somewhere else. But, like I said, this teen's accused of stabbing his abusive father to death. And you see how all the characters fit into the story, and no one seems useless or pointless. Each one has their moments to shine. Very tough to do with 12 guys. A movie that did that well was also John Carpenter's The Thing. It's very hard to have that many characters and have them differentiated and not just fall through in, oh, that character and that character seem like the same guy, can't tell them apart. But here you can. Just each one has their personality or their quirks. So you have like Jack Warden. Oh, hey, he's the New Yorker top guy. Waiting for the baseball game. Oh, fine, whatever. We're going to overtime. You have the one guy who sold insurance and he's always kind of indecisive. You have the one guy who's very meek, and as the story goes on, he kind of shows a bit of backbone. And even at one point in this, John Feeler's character, wait a minute, there's something I was curious about. He even has questions of his own. Again, that's very tough to do, and I do think this is a pretty damn worthwhile script. Like I said, you could do this today, and that would be interesting to do this today with the actors. Like, I mean, if you did, who would you get as the lead? That'd be the question. But you could have like, imagine like you get 12 actors. You get like Morgan Freeman, and you get like Morgan Freeman as the Hume Cronin role, or as the in here the Joseph Sweeney, I believe. Kind of the older man who stands with Henry Fonda. He's the second guy that changes vote. The lead guy, hell, you get like Leonardo DiCaprio, or you get, I don't, that'd be interesting. The cast is like you get Antonio Banderas for the Edward James Olmos, or I forget the actor in this his role. Like you get Antonio Banderas for him. I would choose like Andrew Dice Clay for the Jack Warden Tony Danza role, because people laugh, but if you watch films like A Star Is Born, he'd actually be a good actor. And plus, I'm a fan of the Dice Man, but you watch A Star Is Born, he can make it work. And you get like maybe Al Pacino as the Lee J. Cobb, George C. Scott role, and so you get a lot of people in there. Anyway, as the story unfolds, there's a lot of questions that come up. There were two witnesses and all sorts of stuff. So, okay, one guy said he heard the yelling and the body drop and got to the door in 15 seconds. Well, wait a minute. If he heard the body drop, how can he hear the body drop if supposedly this happened during a train going by? And if you lived near this train yard, you would not be able to hear anything, let alone a body drop and all this. And the guy had a limp that he was trying to hide. But he's going to get to this and this in 15 seconds when they try to redo it. It took like 40 seconds, almost a minute. I do like in both versions they keep at, well, how do you know? I don't know. But again, there's doubt about it. And they do create questions that use the viewer do. Even someone at one point in the bathroom talking to Henry Fonda going, let's say you do convince us. What if you convince us and then you find out later this guy really did do it? And you never really find out at the end. Was the guy truly innocent? Was he not innocent? They choose not guilty, but did the guy do it? Did the guy not do it? That's up to you to decide. Because they never really answer that. Again, from what I understand, if you talk to lawyers, they go, this is bullshit. They would have had a mistrial, or you, or whatever the hell the case may be. Let's see. And a lot of the tensions, you have like one guy who's very much, I wouldn't call him racist, but he's very bigot. He's very a bigot. Michael T. Williamson played him in the remake, and all those guys who live in slums, and then Jack Klugman's like, I lived in a slum. I'm one of those guys that you hate. Well, I don't mean you. Yeah, of course you don't mean him because he's face to face with you. You born with a monopoly on truth? Were you a sadist? Like all this stuff that comes in and rises the tension. And the director does a nice job, like, putting the camera up close to someone when it needs to. It's, again, how hard it would be. It sounds simple, but how hard it would be to film in pretty much one location and make it so it's not boring or not tedious or not slow. Like I said, in both this and the remake, just the way the actors interact with each other, how everybody is working on all cylinders, how all the people interact with, make you question along with them. Wait a minute, this woman who says she saw something, but wait a minute, do you notice these markings? That's from glasses. To anything else make it? So if she slept, she immediately looked. Would she have had her glasses on? Especially in the nighttime? After just waking up? Well, the kid couldn't remember the movies he went to. Well, on the flip side, he just saw that his father was dead, and he's being questioned by cops. Well, what movie do you remember at this point? Well, what do you do 2 days ago? What do you do 3 days ago? And you can't remember the second movie 3 days ago, and you were not under emotional distress, were you? The talk of a switchblade, where, well, actually, the knife was found in there, but Jack Klugman says, well, wait a minute. That's not how you do it. Like, switchblade, there's a reason it's like this. You do like this. You don't do like this. You do like this. Or, if he did kill his dad, why would he come back 3 hours later? I thought it was a very smart script, really showcasing doubts, and you understand why people have doubts and why they change their mind and why they change their opinion and all sorts of stuff. And I thought, like, Jack Warden had a good kind of wisecracking, the New Yorker type of vibe that I thought had some funny lines from him. Henry Fonda had that stature for truth, but at the same time not coming off as cocky or full of himself, or just being sincere of, no, I don't know, but that's the point. Now, I would say I like Jack Lemmon's performance even more, because I just felt a bit more of a... There's emotion in Henry Fonda's performance, but I felt even more emotion in Jack Lemmon's performance. Like I said, I think Sidney Lumet, with the way he handled the shots, was fairly competent. Like, for example, there's a bit with E.G. Marshall's character where there's some some side dialogue. Don't you ever sweat? And he's like, no. And then you get to much later where E.G. Marshall is very adamant that, yes, this kid's guilty. I would have remembered the movies. And then Henry Fonda asks these questions. And then when you get the point I mentioned before, the camera's on him and you see one bead of sweat coming down. I'm like, glad Arnold Schwarzenegger wasn't there. He'd be shooting him in the face. No Total Recall for you. But that's what I mean. It was still an interesting, well-written story. I say interesting with how things are broken down in this length of time. And to see these actors interact with each other, you just get involved in the story, at least for me. I would say the ending, when the last, spoiler, the last turns their vote, I would say I thought George C. Scott was much more emotional, and Lee J. Cobb, he mentioned stuff, because earlier he mentioned about how he hasn't seen his kid for 2 years after a fight. So he gives a little speech, and then he tears a picture. Then almost immediately he says not guilty. I like George C. Scott's more emotional punch in the remake, where he's like, he's yelling, he's like cursing, and what's the matter with you? It seems like even more of a tougher decision for him to contemplate this. And I do like the addition, because I didn't hear this in this version, where Jack Lemmon says, "This isn't your boy. This isn't your kid." Maybe some people would feel that's a bit on the nose. For me, there's more of a nice exclamation point to it. So it just felt like a tougher decision for George C. Scott to do. So I thought it made that a bit more impactful in the remake. But I would definitely say both are still worth a watch. It was interesting to see fairly similar scripts, maybe a bit updated for, because in the remake there are people who are black as part of the jury, while here it's all white because it was a different time. I saw one review saying, "Why are there any women?" I'm like, it's called 12 Angry Men. Why aren't there any women in the movie? It's called 12 Angry Men. You think the title was a lie? God, just sometimes people review stuff and I go, what the fuck? But overall, yeah, I really did enjoy watching this. It was great to see, and there's another one, I'll put on films of that era that I enjoy. This would be up there. I really don't have any problems with it. I didn't really, like I said, the reason I prefer the remake is because that cast I recognize and even more and get more of a kick out of. But again, the cast here does a great job. The black and white photography, the way the director has certain up close shots for a purpose, and the script, the story. It's a very involving story that, again, could be remade over and over again. It would still work, in my opinion. Just to see how these actors would attack these roles. Like I said, you could do this today. I think it would be interesting. I mean, this is definitely one of those that would work as a play. And, different actors get involved. And simple, but yet very effective. So with that said, thanks for watching. Take care, and we will see you guys later. Bye-bye.